You are listening to the Justice in Heels podcast with me, your host, Danielle Hayward. Join me as I discuss interesting legal topics with inspiring female legal professionals who paved the way for the rest of us.
Hello and
Okay.
welcome to the Justice in Heels podcast. Today I am joined by Eulenda Lebese-Cussons, who is going to tell us a bit more about conveyancing. Eulenda, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Danielle. I'm happy to be here.
Okay, so let's get into it. Can you maybe just tell our listeners a bit more about yourself?
Okay, so as you mentioned, I'm Eulenda Lebese-Cussons. I am an attorney, conveyancer, and notary. I am based in the waterfront Cape Town where I own a law firm called Lebese-Cussons Attorney. So I love everything that has to do with property. And my law firm specializes mostly with property transfers, listings, and sales, as well as other related, fields of law that assist our clients who are business people, individuals, etc. So yeah, that is a little bit about me on the work side. But apart from that, most importantly is that I am a mom and a wife, a mom of two, and I live here in the Western Cape. I love it. And yeah, that is in a nutshell who I am. Maybe I should also tell you what I enjoy to do apart from my work. Yeah, I enjoy going to the beach. I enjoy, I daydream about riding motorcycles because that's actually something that I used to do in the past before I had kids. But yeah, that is a little bit about me.
Lovely. Okay, so now that our listeners know a bit more about you, can you maybe tell us what is conveyancing and why is conveyancing so important when we look at real estate in South Africa?
Okay, so conveyancing is very broad, but to help your listeners understand, I can explain it by saying conveyancing is or it includes or involves the process of transferring ownership in immovable property from one person to another. It can be from a seller to a buyer, from a donor to a donee, or in an exchange transaction where people are swapping properties. That is also possible, and that is mostly what we do. But conveyancing goes beyond just transferring ownership in immovable properties. It can also include, finding restrictions in immovable properties to see what are people with rights to the properties allowed to do, what are they restricted from doing, and things like blocking a view, and of someone's view by building another story on your property, or basically the fence that you can erect alongside your property, or basically the right to pass on one property to get to another. All of those things are part of what conveyancing is all about, and we get the pleasure to practice that and help our clients with those issues, and just to resolve them, but primarily transferring ownership in immovable property. Now, conveyancing is very important, obviously, in terms of property transactions, because when people who are doing business, for instance, in property, transact, they need a conveyancer to help them with the transaction, not only to transfer the property, but also to manage the transaction, to mitigate the risks that may be involved, in the transaction, to rule out all the potential problems, and to basically make sure that the transfer happens without any challenges. And that is the job of a conveyancer. So it's very important to even support entrepreneurs who are involved in property transactions, or even simple day-to-day individuals who may simply be buying or selling their property.
Fantastic. Okay, so can you maybe, you have now expanded on what conveyancers really do, but can you maybe tell us how do you become a conveyancer?
Okay, so yeah, a conveyancer, the definition of conveyancer in our law is that a conveyancer is an admitted attorney who is also a conveyancer. So, in order to become a conveyancer, you obviously have to be admitted as an attorney. And then you also, obviously, once you are admitted as an attorney, it means you've done your articles. So, that's one of the requirements. You must have done your articles, you've written your normal for exams to be admitted as an attorney, and then you have to, over and above that, study for your conveyancing board exams, which are very notorious for being quite challenging, but they're not impossible. And I do get to help students with those as well. But you have to write those exams, pass the board exams for conveyancing, and then you can apply for admission as a conveyancer. Now, I must say that it's possible as a newly, a new graduate who's doing their articles to write your board exams for admission as an attorney, and also write your board exams for admission as a conveyancer before you even get admitted as an attorney. So like what I did when I qualified as a conveyancer, I did it during my 2 years of articles, and I just wrote all the 4 board exams in the first year to become an attorney, and in the second year I wrote all the 4 board exams to become both a conveyancer and a notary. So then when I got admitted, it was just the triple admission. So it's possible to do it simultaneously, but a conveyancer is an attorney who's admitted and then gets to become a conveyancer. So it's an extra qualification that entitles you to deal in property transactions.
Fantastic. And what is your opinion on the recent conveyancing board exam results?
Whew, my opinion. You know what? I don't understand how it doesn't make sense for me that people can be able to get a law degree but dismally fail to pass a simple not even a simple exam, because it's arguable that how that paper or those papers are set. But my opinion is that there's something that needs to be done in order, or something needs to be looked into to figure out why most people are failing these exams, because I refuse to believe that people don't have the necessary skills or ability to grasp information so they can pass. I think there's a bigger problem than that, and I think it needs to be looked into. So yeah, that's my opinion. And even in the year that I said for my exams, I mean, it was just a few people, not less than 10 people in the country who passed. And I think that's not there's no badge of honor for being one of the 10. I think it's a concern, it's a problem, and it needs to be looked into.
No, I totally agree with you. And at the end of the podcast, you can also maybe tell us how our listeners can get in touch with you to also help them to study for the board exams. Okay,
Absolutely.
so moving on then, can you maybe tell us what are some of the red flags that buyers and sellers need to look at in terms of the conveyancing process when buying a property?
Okay, so some of the red flags actually need to be looked into before you even sign an offer to purchase as a buyer and even as a seller. Because if you are a seller, you most probably are using an agent. An agent is also looking out for their own interest. They want to earn a commission. They should also be looking out for your interest, but in real life, anyone that is transacting where money is involved needs to be mindful of the fact that I can't just sign something that I don't understand. So I think number one is to make sure you understand the document that is in front of you. You understand it fully enough to sign it comfortably without getting yourself into unnecessary problems. That's number one, as a buyer and as a seller. And also as a buyer, it's to just make sure that you don't rush to sign the agreement before you make sure that all the necessary due diligence has been conducted, that the property, you can seek the assistance of a property attorney like myself to assist you with making the offer, to assist you with putting in conditions that may be very necessary to protect your interests, such as saying the offer is made on condition that there must be an inspection done, and should there be a report produced by a professional saying there are latent defects, then those defects will be attended to at the seller's expense. That is something that can protect the buyer. And also understanding that if you're buying property that's 10 or 7 million, the transfer duty, which is tax that's payable on a sliding scale for the purpose of acquiring property, is going to be such and such an amount. You need to understand that so you don't make the mistake, because what we see most often is that people just get excited with the process. They sign the offer, they don't understand it. And when we, the conveyancer, start saying, hey, here is the pro forma account, please make payment immediately so that we can pay transfer duty so you can cover transfer fees, they are shocked and appalled because they were not told about the costs involved. So I think just doing your research with somebody that's knowledgeable, they will be able to take you through all the costs involved and tell you what you can expect, and even give you a calculation of, like, a breakdown of all the costs, so that you know what's happening, and also do a contract review. Because in our law, the person that's drafting the contract obviously is instructed by somebody. So if you are signing as a seller, as a buyer, the contract has been drafted by a lawyer who's drafting on the instructions of either a seller or an agent. And likewise, if you are the seller, the contract, and you're using an agent, the contract has been drafted by a lawyer representing the agent. So contract review is very important before you sign. So, once again, you must reach out to property attorneys and make use of the services, get a contract review. What you pay for that is compared to a legal battle that involves 500,000 in damages because of a leaking roof that the seller didn't disclose and they were aware about, or something like that. So it's very important to just do it alongside somebody that understands, that can help you protect your interests.
So you've now mentioned, consulting with a property attorney or a conveyancer. Can you maybe tell us, how do you choose the correct conveyancer for your situation, or property attorney for your situation?
Okay, so that is a very good question, Danielle. It is important to understand that in our law, the sellers have a discretion to choose the conveyancer. But the seller is also a party to a contract that is obviously, that you are about to enter into as a buyer. So most buyers also make conditions to say, I'm buying this property on condition that we will use this conveyancer. So it's not like you don't have a say at all, but it's important to understand that generally the law says the seller can choose. And if you are somebody that's not mindful of, who the seller could potentially be representing, the conveyancer could potentially be, in favor of, the conveyancer in general needs to be not unbiased. So they need to protect, act fairly, and protect the interest of both the seller and the buyer. And if there's a dispute, a good conveyancer will make sure that the dispute gets resolved between the parties and that everyone lives happy. But if it happens, this is something that I always do my best, absolute best, to avoid, and I've successfully done this, where I help my clients negotiate and they reach an agreement and we transfer the property successfully. If there's any issue, for instance, one moves in earlier than usual, and they find certain things, and they now starting to claim damages, or seller needs to pay for this, we always try to sort that out. Or maybe one party has paid late, the transfer fees, and the seller is saying, because of your lateness, I've suffered damages, I've had to pay my bond for more than 2 months because of you then claiming damages. So things like that can happen, and it's important to have a conveyancer that's able to help you negotiate, so that you reach common ground without having to say to the buyer, go get another lawyer who can represent your interest, because that's what we are required to do. When clients fight and there is no common ground, they can't reach an agreement, the conveyancer needs to tell the buyer to get another lawyer. But a good conveyancer is always able to manage the transaction so well that that doesn't ever need to happen. And obviously, if it's things that are beyond a conveyancer's control, then you would need to have a situation where the buyer has to get another lawyer, so that it can be fair, and the lawyer that's representing the seller can deal with the lawyer that's representing the buyer, instead of an uneven situation where the seller is the only one represented.
Okay, thank you for that. So, how has technology impacted the conveyancing process in the recent years, or did it not really have an impact at all?
No, technology has a huge impact in conveyancing. We use systems to process our transactions from the time an OTP, an offer to purchase, is signed, to the process of collecting information and storing information and keeping clients updated, with the feedback, and requesting certain documentation, and all those things. That is, we use technology for that. And I cannot imagine a situation where we didn't have technology, it would actually be a nightmare. So we have a lot of automations as well. A simple click of a button where you update that you've done something like raise application, and the system is able to send an email, send an SMS to client to tell them what you've done without you having to actively do that. So that's the role of technology, and it has been a great role. And I think there's more that we still need. For instance, we need the title deeds at the deeds office to be digital, so that we can transact even more smoothly. And I know that there has been talks of introduction of blockchain in conveyancing transactions, which is also an interesting phenomenon. And I think it's only going to improve things once the advancements have been made, and that process is finalized. But I think technology is absolutely indispensable when it comes to how we do our job.
But can
Mhm.
you maybe just tell us, do you foresee any other changes happening in the conveyancing space in the next few years? Or are there any other changes that you hope will take place in the next few years?
Absolutely. I think, things are forever improving, especially because this is also another area of law, and the law will always be improving and changing as, we interact with it, and as people come across problems and they get solved, and, we have new law because of that. So, yeah, I think the one of going digital is definitely something that the deeds office has been really, aiming to finalize. There have been some challenges, but I am looking forward to a time when we can log on the system and just pull a title deed, or even transact from start to finish electronically without having to go. I mean, we still use what we call pigeonholes at the deeds office. To receive deliveries, they put, our physical documents. We're still using paper. We lodge a deed of transfer, that is the original, as well as your draft and your powers of attorney, using the pigeonhole, and we receive them. So you have to send a clerk to go and collect and to take the stuff, and and obviously that's a old way of doing things that we still are experiencing. But I can definitely see that things are moving towards that direction of digitization, and I cannot wait for that time, because I think it's going to save our clients time. And if it's saving their time, it's saving their money, and it's helping them transact easily in their businesses. So then it's a good thing for the business side of things as well.
So you've recently announced that you are publishing a book. Do you maybe want to tell us a bit more about that?
Yes. So it's actually a lawyer's guide to doing business and buying property in South Africa, and it's for non-residents, but it's also applicable for residents. And I'm excited about it because this book is basically as a result of the clients I've assisted. So, our firm started servicing clients who were coming from different parts of the world, like America, Netherlands, and we've done transfers for even sellers who are based outside the country, and obviously now had to look into certain laws that affect people who are not resident in South Africa but transacting in South Africa. For instance, your withholding taxes would apply to a seller who's a non-resident selling a property that's more than 2 million. So we have to look into that. For transactions where a buyer is introducing funds in the country, we have to think about when they have to take that money out of South Africa back into their country at a later stage. That's repatriation of funds. It has its own requirements. We have to look into the legalities and the requirements of them introducing the money in the country when they are buying, and the South African Reserve Bank's authorizations and approvals and all those things. And they can be very daunting. So for me, I think I did that because I noticed some of the gaps as I was dealing with these clients who were buying property as investors, who were not maybe planning on moving to the country but wanting to have a South African asset that they can capitalize on. And I noticed the gaps, and when I started writing to just, give a step-by-step guide to say, when you are buying property and you're not a resident of the country, these are some of the considerations you need to have in mind. And if you are a seller that's non-resident, this is what you need to make sure you know. If there's withholding tax, this is how you can get your refund, so that you don't lose out on your investment and you are kept fully informed. So I think that's how that idea came about, and I'm quite excited about finalizing that and putting it out there to get. It's not only going to be a lawyer's guide, there's going to actually be a program that's structured around it where people can actually have access to the entire program that includes the book, and then video content where I'm actually allowed more on the topics covered in the book, as well as free one-on-one consultations with some of our attorneys, including myself, where we can deal specifically with the clients one-on-one and see what help they need and how we can assist them. So it has all of that. So it's a guide as well as a program that's designed to add value to clients who want to do business in the country, who want to move here, or who want to just simply have location independent business or just buy property in South Africa. But all of that is covered in it, in the book, as well as in the program that is soon to be released.
Sure, that really sounds like a game changer. I can't wait to actually also buy myself a copy and then to read it as well.
Thank you.
But but thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. I have learned so much and it's been so much fun.
Thank you so much for having me. I also enjoyed myself, and yeah, appreciate you having me here.
Amazing. So, where can our listeners reach you?
Okay, so here on LinkedIn, it's Eulenda Lebese-Cussons, Lebese with Lebese dash Cousins, Cussons. On Instagram, it's Eulenda, Eulenda.Lebese.Cousins. And yeah, on TikTok, it's also the same name. So they can reach me there. And then my email is Eulenda, Eulenda at lcattorneys.co.za for those that want to send an email to make an inquiry or to just ask questions. So yeah, that's my information.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Justice in Heels podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, feel free to share it with your friends on social media and tag us. As this podcast has a legal element, just a quick disclaimer that all views expressed in this podcast are not necessarily the views of the firms, companies, or brands that we are associated with. Until next time, goodbye.